Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's case was suggested by longtime brain scratcher and friend of the channel, Christy Groves, and is called Borrowed Waffle Stompers. It was a beautiful day on August 23, 1972, in Edmonds, Washington, and 20-year-old Jody Loomis planned to spend her afternoon horseback riding. To get to the stables and her horse, Saudi, Jody had to ride her white 10-speed 6 miles, a trip that usually her parents, John and Rosemary, would make with her. This would be her first time taking that trip alone. Wearing a crop top and jeans, she decided to ask her 12-year-old sister Jana if she could borrow her new Waffle Stomper boots, a heavy hiking boot with ridged soles that resemble the ridges of a waffle. Jana had just been given the popular boots to start her school year. Although they were impractical for horseback riding, Jana was so excited that her big sister wanted to wear them, she readily agreed. Jody told her mother and live-in fiance that she would be back before dark. She also asked her neighbor, Linda Hook, if she would like to go horseback riding as well. Linda was preparing to move out of town and was unable to go, so Jody started the trip herself from Winesap Road to the stables. As the afternoon wore on and the sun started to set, Jody's parents began to worry. When darkness fell and Jody still wasn't home, they made frantic phone calls trying to find her with little luck. Around 11 p.m. that night, officers knocked on their door to tell them that Jody had been found dead. That afternoon, at about 5:30 p.m., a couple drove down Penny Creek Road, which would have been near the halfway point for Jody's trip, looking for a spot to target practice with their firearms. When they came to a tree that had fallen in the road, the male driver got out to try to move it and found Jody lying nearby. She was bleeding, partially clothed, with a gunshot wound to her head, and was unable to speak. Quickly, the couple put her in their car and drove her to Stevens Memorial Hospital. Unfortunately, Jody was declared dead on arrival. An autopsy would show that Jody had been shot by a .22 caliber gun. She had also been sexually assaulted. As police started to question friends and family, they started to piece together Jody's afternoon. Investigators believed that the last person to see her alive was 14-year-old Kenda Machoro. Kenda was sitting in her driveway selling fruit from the family farm at 5 p.m. She saw Jody pass by on her 10-speed. Not only did she recognize her, but she was also able to remember that she had been wearing her sister's Waffle Stomper boots. In the weeks and months that followed, other witnesses were questioned and new leads were checked out. Her clothes and shoes were sent to the FBI crime lab to see if any evidence could be found on them. They were unable to find anything, so the evidence was sent back to investigators in Washington. Soon, investigators just had nowhere else to go and no suspects. Jody's case would languish for 36 years before there would finally be a break. In 2008, Jody's case came under review, and it was decided that her evidence would be sent to the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab to be tested for DNA. Jody's clothes had been lost through the years, but they still had her boots. At the crime lab, a forensic scientist found what the FBI had been unable to back in the 70s. On those boots was a slightly degraded, microscopic sample of an unknown male's DNA. The sample was helpful to rule out potential suspects, but little more, as the sample didn't match anyone in law enforcement databases. In 2009, Jody was featured in a cold case cards deck from the sheriff's office that was sent to inmates throughout the state. Again, new leads were developed, but were eventually eliminated. In 2018, Parabon Nanolabs extracted a DNA profile and set about the task of finding the suspect's family tree through genetic genealogy. Oregon genealogist Deb Stone was able to connect the sample to a particular family and a particular individual in that family, a man named Terrence Miller. Miller was a retired heavy equipment operator from Edmonds who had divorced 3 times and was now married in his 4th marriage. He had been accused in the past of sexually abusing children and was convicted of lewd conduct back in 1968. Investigators were able to show that he lived only 5 miles from the area Jody was found. However, to prove their case and make an arrest, they needed more of his DNA. Police soon trailed him to Tulalip Resort Casino, where he discarded a coffee cup. When a sample of his saliva was extracted from it, his DNA showed to be a perfect match for the sample found on Jody's boot. In April of 2019, Terrence Miller was arrested at his home and charged with the first-degree murder of Jody Loomis. He was given a $1 million bond that his wife paid, and he was sent home with an ankle monitor to await his trial. Before his trial began, a longtime friend asked him if he committed the murder. He said that he didn't want to talk about it, but he thought that with the DNA, he probably wouldn't be coming home, and stated that it was a dark time in his life. Every time Miller's court date neared, the defense argued for more time to review evidence or filed for continuances for different reasons. Finally, Jana Loomis, now Jana Loomis Smith, Jody's younger sister, addressed the court. Their mother and father were dead, neither having seen any justice for their daughter, and many of their other family members were elderly. Would they still be around when the case finally went to trial? Or would they also go to their graves waiting for justice, just like John and Rosemary did? The fall of 2019 would see the first court proceedings. Jurors were blocked from hearing of the abuse Miller was accused of, or any of the other allegations of molestation and lewd behavior. His defense attorney argued that he was innocent and that he and Jody never even knew each other. They also argued that the DNA sample taken from the boots in 2008 should be excluded because of sloppy forensic work. She claimed the technician had diluted samples, then covered up some of the results and didn't have their supervisor even review them. Prosecutors argued that Jody had been either lured or forced to the area she was found in by a then 30-year-old Miller. They brought many experts to the stand, as well as Jody's friends and family and the woman who had initially discovered Jody's body. DNA analysts came and crime scene technicians took the stand, who testified to the validity of the sample that was found and the testing process it had endured. 2 weeks later, on November 9th, 2019, the jury was sent in for final deliberations. As they sat deciding Miller's fate, at around 10 a.m., a call came into the police station. A family member of Miller's had just found him dead in his home from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, even though he had surrendered all of his guns upon his initial arrest. Jurors were not told of the death until after they returned with their decision. They found Terrence Miller guilty of the first-degree murder of Jody Loomis. After the verdict was read, Jana Loomis Smith addressed the court and reporters. She lamented the time lost with her sister and the life that she could have led. She said she didn't want vengeance on Miller. She just wanted the truth to be reflected in the court's decision, that he was guilty of her sister's murder. Jana thought that the outcome might give hope to other families and victims involved in cold cases. Quote, "Truth never dies." They thought it was going to die. They thought it was so old that we wouldn't be able to follow through with the truth. We miss Jody's love, her sisterhood, and this pain is now part of our surviving life. Friends are there to help me, but they're not my sister. Case cracked. I would like to thank the Seattle Times, the Washington Post, HeraldNet.com, KIRO7 News, and SnohomishCountyWA.gov. Of course, the biggest thank you goes to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case, and here she is now to discuss it with us. Wow, Christy, another real heartbreaker of a case, and we've certainly got some big things to talk about in this one. I know typically in the court proceedings, the defense will bring up like all kinds of alternate theories. They're basically just trying to throw some shadow of doubt, like some question about what really happened. Did they bring up any particular alternate theories to defend Miller?
They did. The most prominent one was they said that she was shot by a stray bullet while she was out there. The area is known for hunting and practice shooting. But I mean, if that's true, where did the DNA sample come from?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and not just that, also their conclusion about it being a sexual assault, because usually, there's evidence to help support that, and they might not be very upfront with that in terms of releasing that information to the media, but if there's certain bruising, or if you could tell they had been held down, things of that nature, that'll sometimes help them with that conclusion. And then there's other, obviously, much more detailed analysis they can do to come to that conclusion as well. So yeah, I would think that one's tough. And it's weird because I know we're going to talk about someone else that was kind of considered a suspect in a few minutes. I think it's going to connect to that a little bit. I didn't realize that about the area, that it was known for hunting and practice shooting.
Mhm.
But the contamination argument, also pretty strange as well to me. I mean, just, how do you justify that that guy's DNA wound up in a lab?
Well, how did it end up there?
Yeah,
What else do we need to investigate him for that they had his DNA sample sitting there?
right, right. Yeah, and it's one thing to kind of call out, like maybe you didn't think things were handled properly and all that, but to the point of actually getting a complete bunk result like that,
Yeah.
and a bunk result that makes sense. Like, remember the story that we talked about with the where they thought there was a serial killer because the same DNA was showing up all over the place, but then they traced it back to a different country where the swabs were being made. Like, you knew the result wasn't valid. This result points back to someone that lives 5 miles from the scene, has pre-existing history of having issues like this in the past. It's just, I think the result kind of speaks for itself there. But
Oh, yeah, it did.
so tell us a little bit about who other people were suspicious of with this case. They thought someone else might be responsible for it.
They did. They actually tried to argue that a man named Walter Morris might have killed Jody. Now, the couple that actually picked her up out of the woods and took her to the hospital was a 33-year-old man named Walter Morris and a young woman that he was with named Kathy. Now, Kathy was able to testify in court. She told the same story that we told in Case Cracked. Their car was blocked by a tree. They found Jody, loaded her up, and took her to the hospital.
Right.
Now, Walter Morris actually died months, or not months. I think he died years. No, it was months. He died months before the case went to trial.
Yeah.
Prosecutors and defense attorneys were able to deposition him, and the jury was played, a recording of his deposition.
Right.
So it really killed that theory right off, that there wasn't really anything to connect him to that other than the fact that they found her.
Well, and it's another thing where the logic seems to defy it. Like, why are they going to put her in the car and race her to a hospital and do essentially a life-saving effort if they were really the ones responsible? Now, interestingly, if you kind of couple that up with the defense's theory about the stray bullet idea, maybe the defense was trying to point to, oh, it was really Walter Morris, because as we even said in the story, him and his girlfriend were out there driving around looking for a place for target practice. So I guess that would mean they probably had weapons on them as well. They probably had a gun at least with them.
They did. They definitely did.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if the caliber would match up. I don't know if it was a 22. 22 is pretty common for going shooting weapons practice like that. So it might have even been a 22. Obviously, they could do forensic tests to see if it was really their bullet or not. So I kind of get, I think, where the defense was going with just trying to bring up that question of, no, we think it was a stray bullet. Because then you could imagine this situation where Walter and Kathy are out there doing target practice. Something happens. They accidentally strike Jody, and then it turns into a life-saving effort where they're like, oh, my God, we got to get her in the car and get her to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, there was just too much information for that consideration to fly, really.
Well, and I think too they were trying to play up on Miller and Kathy's relationship. He was 33, she was 18. So it was a little salacious back then. So I know they tried to make him look like a dubious character having this affair with a younger woman and play it into the whole thing.
Well, and even that, it's kind of interesting that you'll bring that up in terms of a 33 and an 18-year-old, but you're not going to bring up the criminal past of your own defendant, or you're actually going to get that excluded from the trial. I really do appreciate that they still let the jury deliberate without them knowing what Miller had done to end his life, and that they still got their result, that they got their result without that consideration, because who knows how that could have changed things. So Christy, this looks like another story of a case that is just solved by focus, just by never giving up on it. And yeah, there's times where it had to be put down because there was just no new information to process, but they kept getting back to it and then eventually ran it through the new technologies. And here we are with a conclusion. I really appreciate that they went that way about it.
Yeah, and thank God for Jim Scharf. He was the one who handled the Snohomish County Precious Jane Doe case. He was also involved with this one. There was a push in 2008 by his team to look at the DNA again on a lot of these cold cases. And if he hadn't have pushed to have that happen, who knows how long that boot would have sat there with that unfound sample.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I appreciate when we can always highlight someone like that. So thank you so much, Christy. Really appreciate all your work on today's episode. And I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Sigrid E. O'Hearn, Jennifer Dixon, Angela Welch Sola, Amanda Beard, and Melissa Heinbach. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee, like Perlette Toussaint recently did. We know that learning about the mechanisms that help support and find justice in these cases is so important to understand the many unsolved cases we also cover, and we really appreciate your help and support in allowing us to continue doing that. Christy and I will be off next week recovering from CrimeCon. Our regular show schedule will resume on Monday, June 7th, but we still have plenty of content coming for you this week. A new episode of Seriously Mysterious and a new Crime After Crime podcast are both releasing tomorrow, Tuesday, June 1st. Also, a midweek video and a new Brain Scratch will be coming this week right here on the Lord and Arts channel.